Almost 2:30 everyone, so we'll try and make a start. So I've come here from the temperate zone of my office to this refrigerator, and we'll try and bear up. So, are we okay camera-wise? Good, okay. Okay everyone, well welcome to this September meeting of the Public Accountability Board. It is 2:30, so we'll make a start. You're all very welcome. I won't go around the room this time, but if people do speak, if they can introduce themselves. But we do have at least one new face, which is Charlotte. I know you're doing a report a bit later on, but if you just briefly say who you are now, introduce yourself, you're very welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm Superintendent Charlotte Bloxham. I've recently transferred to South Yorkshire from North Yorkshire, so not too far away but a little bit different. I'm working in OSU. I've replaced, some of you may know, Lydia Linsky, so I've taken her from Lydia, who is due to retire very shortly. So I'm very pleased to be here. Everyone's been very lovely, and yeah, but this is my first public accountability meeting, so please be gentle.
Honeymoon phase.
Everyone's been lovely up until now.
Well, you're very welcome. Is the North Yorkshire is leaking in the direction of South Yorkshire, is it?
It's maybe a slight
Drip. Okay.
We're very selective though who we take.
Okay.
Don't describe yourself as a drip.
No, we're happy with drips, we don't mind. So we are being filmed, all usual rules apply. That will be uploaded onto the website in due course and is publicly available, and people are watching now, live streaming. Are there any announcements? Item 3 on the agenda. Okay. Item 4, public questions. I don't think, Sally, we've got any. No public questions. Item 5, urgent items. I think there are a couple probably that we've got. One is around body-worn video. Rick, if you could say a word around that, and then perhaps something about RAC, which is an issue in the public domain at the moment. So, Rick, over to you.
So from the briefing that we had last Wednesday, Commissioner, in relation to the body-worn video and the loss of the data in relation to that, which goes from July 2020 up until May 2023. Obviously been working with the CJ partners, as you're aware, and the judiciary, just to look at the overall impact that may have on the cases that are post-charge or pre-charge. Today we've got 82 cases that are in the post-charge and pre-charge situation within criminal justice, but the impact has been assessed as there is very, very low jeopardy in relation to any of the criminal cases. Some of the evidence, obviously, as we discussed last week, can be obtained through other means, but that is our main focus in relation to the victims that may be affected within that. In relation to victims moving forward, we have got a process in place to make sure that if there is any issues that need to be addressed to support victims through the criminal justice process, then we can do that on a bespoke basis. To do a one-cap-fits-all would be inappropriate, because some of the body-worn video is not really relevant to the actual case papers as such. It just forms part of the overall information that is there to support the cases. So Judge Richardson, the Recorder of Sheffield, is aware, and he shares our comments and our updates to the higher judiciary and the Crown Courts and the Magistrates' Courts as well. They're briefed on a regular basis to see where we are. We're compliant with the disclosure, and we've offered advice and guidance for officers. If they have got body-worn video that supports a case going forward, then obviously there's a process now for them to follow, so we're making sure that that's disclosed at the earliest opportunity. So, although headlines from last week sound really horrendous in relation to it, and we can't, decry that or put that down, we're still working with the investigation to find out how the true root cause of that has happened. But that, as we discussed again last week, will take a considerable amount of time to do because of the technology that's needed to support that, but that's on its way. But the main focus is around the victims and the jeopardy to any cases, which is, as I've said, is very, very low.
Yeah. And you still maintain a gold group?
Yeah.
Around that.
Gold group meets twice a week now in relation to that. I am away after tomorrow, and Jackie is going to take that forward, so that will remain in place until we're happy that we've got everything right.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Any other comment or? Good, thank you. And you'll keep us in touch with?
Yeah.
That's going good. And then RAC.
Obviously, we're aware of the concerns about RAC across sort of public sector estates, started in education, but has rolled out now across the hospitals and courts as well. Our estates department are currently surveying our buildings to establish whether or not we have got any buildings that have been impacted by that, and obviously we'll keep you updated as to the findings of that.
Good, thank you very much. Okay. Right, shall we move on then to, well, item 6 is, what is it? Item to be considered in the absence of the book. I don't think there are any. Item 7, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Item 8, minutes of the notes of the last meeting, which was held on the 6th of July. They've been circulated. Any comments on those? Everybody happy with those? And matters arising or actions from those, which is page 11. I think there's just the one, isn't there? Tim, this is you.
Sorry, I missed that, Commissioner.
Page 11. Action arising.
The action.
Further information to be provided on the work of the Lados.
Right, I have to confess, I have to take that away, Commissioner.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of that.
That's all right. We'll keep that ongoing.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you very much. We come to police force performance, and item 10 is the Doncaster District summary. For Charlotte's benefit, what we do is we look at the force performance of each of the districts in turn. Sheffield, Doncaster, Rotherham, Barnsley. This time it's Doncaster. That's quite near North Yorkshire, so you're probably aware of Doncaster. And you're from Doncaster. Oh, well,
So I'll be very interested.
You'll be very interested in this report. And we ask the Chief Super each time to present the report. But we don't go through it line by line. Usually what we do is I pick on a few issues that occur to me, and then we give space at the end for the District Commander to comment further if he wants. So if I take you to that report then, and I'm on page 16. We begin with page 16. This is this is around the aspiration for a fourth response team at Adwick, and I'm saying that's being held up because of ward boundaries, amongst anything else, trying to align those. I wondered if you could just say a little bit about how that's going and how you're managing it in the meantime.
So, yeah, thank you, Commissioner. The aspiration I know we've talked about previously, a fourth response base we think will probably help our response times in some of those more rural areas such as Norton and Asken, which is quite a large ward. Currently our response function parade on duty at College Road, so we still have coverage. But you will know that we moved to 4 neighbourhood teams at the start of this year, with a neighbourhood team based in the north. We're able to do that because the IT system that manages our crime allocation and our incident demand allocation, we can work around that. I think it's too great a risk for us to move forward and start pushing resources into a 4-sector model for our response teams without that IT infrastructure ready and in place, because we have the risk of missing calls, missing demand. So it is something that we frequently review. It's part of great pieces of work around our IT infrastructure around the county. I know that Rotherham also, I think, are looking at some boundary changes. So we need that IT system to replicate the changes in the direction that we want to go.
So in a sense, is this on hold then until that's
Yes,
done?
it is. It would be. We did consider whether we could run it without, and I think it's, as I say, it's. I think it'd be too great a risk in terms of the response times.
Thanks. On to page 17, 1.12. There's reference there to an incident triage team. I don't think I've seen that mentioned before. Could you say a word about what is the incident triage team?
So we've tried different permutations of this. Some months ago we had some officers that were restricted duties working in our district support hub who would make contact with public who have recorded an incident with us and still waiting an officer to attend. As you appreciate, Commissioner, that our demand ebbs and flows throughout the day, so there are periods of time where it is more challenging to get to see people as quickly as we wish. So the incident triage team, that whole concept allows an officer to ring a member of the public, and in some cases can still resolve the complaint, they issue the request without resource having to attend. What we have now is we have a small team of officers who've got various restrictions for different reasons, not able to deploy in the traditional sense that work from the force control room. And so we've provided some staff to help support that, and they will look at the active queues across the force and see where there's some of the greater demand at that particular point in time, and help to resolve, and if not resolve, then at least risk assess the circumstances and give the member of the public an update as to why we've been unable to attend at that very moment.
So this is going to be an ongoing feature then? This is not just...
Yeah, it's been run through the force control room. So the district support hubs at all the different boroughs had got various different sort of permutations, managed more centrally.
Yeah, no, it seems good. Just a little bit lower on that page, 1.14, retail crime.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a few emails again. We had quite a flurry of emails about retail crime a little while ago, and then it seemed to die away. We are starting to get them again now. I've had them from 2 MPs and councillors, and from the retail sector itself. It does seem to be, perhaps this is something more general, not just at Doncaster, but does seem to be something that's growing, and I know we're talking to Dan Thorpe, PCC Dan Thorpe, about the possibility of having some sort of round table to try and bring some of these people together, because I think it's got to be a bit of quid pro quo of them helping you as well as you helping them, and I'm not sure the balance of that is always right. I don't know whether there's anything you want to say around that now, or whether we see how that goes.
I think the national picture, some of the observations from the Home Sec a week or so ago about crime probably contributes to some of that concern, doesn't it, around our county. We do have seen, we have seen some increases in theft, shoplifting in Doncaster, but it is consistent with that sort of national picture. I know that we don't always provide a swift response to theft, shoplifting, because we would provide a swift response to vulnerability or an emergency call where someone is under threat or at risk. And I think actually when you explain that to the public and to retailers, they do understand that. So I've been aware of some concerns in Doncaster City Centre in particular over the past few months, and I've started meeting with people from the Chamber of Commerce. I've been, in fact, I think you and I attended one together some months back, Commissioner, with some people concerned about business crime. But I think when you deal with it directly and sort of show sometimes the difficult decisions that we have to make about which particular demand we will meet with our resource at any given time, I think people do understand that we will always prioritise a child who's missing, or a domestic abuse incident, or a sexual assault incident, or one of violence that's taken place. I think what we need to get better at, though, is joining the dots with the crimes once they've been committed. So what we're trying to power up in Doncaster is the use of DAMS, which is an online system that allows retailers to upload their CCTV to the cloud. It means that we can draw it down much quicker, see patterns of offending through same offenders on CCTV. And we've got, again, some officers that are restricted who are working at District Support Hub. They're a bit of a retail crime team, and that sounds like a really grandiose sort of team. It's a small group of officers that help to join those dots and try and prepare packages for our response and neighbourhood teams to, once Ian Prophet, the shoplifter, has been identified as actually having committed a number through CCTV, we can try and break that cycle quickly, make arrests quicker, and sort of stop a trend in its early stages, and hopefully bring about some better results for the retailers. You're right, though, some of the retailers are possibly in a position, some of the national companies perhaps in a better position to do more to prevent them occurring in the first place. But when you look in Doncaster, we've got good relationship with sort of our shopping centres. The French Gate Centre is a good example. So we work well with the local authority and the retailers in somewhere like the French Gate Centre to try and look at sort of the target hardening mentality, problem-solving approach to retail crime.
Yeah. No, I think it's that. I think you're right. Everything you say there. And there's something about the level of that particular convenience store or that area, and then there's something about the strategic approach of all of us, including some of these big chains as well. So, okay. Thank you. I'm over the page on 18 now, which is 1.15. Just a comment, really, that your low sickness rate, 1%, and just
And that's on a response function.
on the response, yes, but
Yeah.
that just seems amazing.
And it probably does seem amazing because it's a challenging role, isn't it, as a
Exactly.
response team, particularly at a place like Doncaster, which is a large area. So, but we've got a refreshed sort of wellbeing plan. Chief Inspector Struggles leads the response function. I think we try and do as much as we can to try and look after our staff in what's a difficult piece of work.
Okay, thank you. A little bit lower, 2.2, residential burglary. You talked there about reductions in burglary offences. Since the implementation of the dedicated burglary team known as Operation Castle, we're clearly very positive. And I just wonder, is that going to be sustained? Is it sustainable?
Is it sustainable? Yes, because we have to sustain it. I think when you look back over a number of years, I don't think we're anywhere near where we want to be in terms of burglary volumes, and it is still and will continue to be one of our sort of 3 priorities at the district. I think it's something that's really important to the public, as you would imagine. Having a dedicated team has just brought that bit of focus, and it can't be just about sort of a sergeant and sort of 4 or 5 individuals. It has to be a full team effort across the borough. So we look to prioritise attendance at burglaries. We have burglary scene attenders who are police staff rather than police officers, who we don't have 24-hour coverage, but certainly give good service to the public. We've got sort of improving victim satisfaction survey around burglary in our borough at the moment as well, over the most recent survey. And we've got a greater determination around bringing in suspects earlier, trying to build a case around the burglary, but also seeking to bring about charges for other offences where appropriate. And you'll see from the report that actually out of sort of 38 burglars I think we've arrested, and actually 42 other offences have been charged through those investigations. And it really is dealing with the whole victim-offender location triangle. We actually bring some real focus to the small number of people that offend. We can start to bring some of those volumes down. But they're also complemented with problem-solving plans. That team's complemented by the neighbouring teams who run problem-solving plans in our high output areas, and they're reviewed every month.
Yeah. I noticed from emails and other ways in which people contact me that residential burglary is starting to creep up again, and I don't know quite whether that's seasonal or cost of living crime, I don't know, but it is something but one of the things that, and we've noticed this before, that one of the things that people do get anxious about is follow-up and just, you know, what's happening, even if it's nothing's happening. But do you know what I mean?
That's
contact.
And I think that's where our burglary scene attenders really help at Doncaster with that consistent contact with the victim.
Okay. I'm on to page 20, 2.9, town centre ward, and you say it continues to be the area with the highest volume of offences, with a 5% increase taking place. And then you say, final sentence, many of these offences are committed by young people and children on other similar aged victims, which was a bit concerning. I don't know whether this has always been the case, or whether this is new, or whether there's something happening here, or whether you could say something around that, and whether you could say something about whether other partners are involved in this, schools, and so on.
Yeah, so it is a worry for us, those increases, because actually they contradict a broader reduction in robbery across the borough that we've seen for sort of since the end of last summer, really. General downward trend. So the central ward is a bit of a hotspot. Some of this bleeds into antisocial behaviour, and I know we've spoken before about the attraction that the city centre has to young people, particularly during school holidays. And we do then see sort of spikes in antisocial behaviour on particular days during school holiday times. Linked to some of that are sort of young people committing robberies on others, stealing bikes, stealing phones from each other. The way that we record our crime is still a robbery, just because they're young people committing offences, or young people. We do work with the schools though, a neighbourhood team, again the French Gate Centre and the local authority teams really instrumental in pulling together a piece of work to identify a whole cohort of young people that were causing some problems in the city centre. The follow-up was undertaken with the schools, with letters to the schools, contact with the parents of the children that were identified. There are still robbery offences that happen sort of outside of young people, with sort of through misuse of drugs and robberies of users stealing from other users, or that is still one of the factors in the city centre. But we've got a plan to deal with it. So we have a patrol plan. And actually, the work that we're doing at the district is complemented by Op Grip and Op Civitas patrols. So Grip, as you know, the patrols for most serious violence. Op Civitas is the new operational name for the antisocial behaviour patrols. So Doncaster city centre benefits from those two, and actually when you look at the identified hotspots for both of those two operations, they fit together quite nicely, and we have really quite good coverage from those additional resources every day of the week.
Are we talking mainly holidays or weekends, or is this is some of this during the daytime, school day time?
Some it's during the daytime, weekends. Some days in particular, funnily enough, Sunday afternoons are we see challenges around antisocial behaviour and challenges with young people in the city centre.
Just a little further on visibility and engagement, 2.11, 2.11. You mentioned the IAG and the membership of the IAG. I wonder if you could say a word about that and how diverse you say it's diverse. How diverse?
Well, there's lots more to be done. I think when we started to look at this some 12 years ago, I think we had good uptake from particular reps within the local authority, but actually from the LGBT representation or Muslim group representation wasn't particularly good. So Pete Thorpe, the operational superintendent, and Joe Hunt, the chief inspector for the neighbourhood team, have done a lot to try and broaden the membership. Pete has started looking at using alternative locations under police stations, because that could potentially be a barrier. So moving the IAG around. And I think you'll have seen from elsewhere in the report that as part of that engagement process, Superintendent Thorpe had sort of hosted a Muslim women's group event at College Road to promote the IAG, promote the work of the police, promote careers in policing. We have a Muslim officer, female officer at College Road that came and gave a talk about the day in the life in a police officer in South Yorkshire, particularly Doncaster. That went down really well, something that we can build on, and has no doubt helped to bring about some of the changes in the profile of the IAG.
Do you have much contact with the mosque that is quite near to College Road, the one with the tall minaret and the symbol on the top? I've never been there. It's one of the few that I've...
The neighbourhood team, I've not personally been commissioner, but
I'll talk
Inspector,
to them about
Inspector Bird has contact with them.
I'm on to page 21, ASB hotspots, which you mentioned, and you talk about additional rural patrols to be identified. I think this will go down very well in certain rural areas. I don't know how far on that is, but whether there's anything you can say any more than that.
We're working with the local authority to see how we can work better together in some of the rural communities. It's really tried and tested in the city centre. You know, the local authority have the city centre ambassadors and their sort of communities team. I think it's almost easier for us to work together in a sort of a more urban environment. So I've met a few times with one of the directors, Dan Swain, about how the teams can kind of change their working arrangements, and that's on both sides of the house, to work out in the rural areas. We get good buy-in though in terms of visibility from things like the off-road bike team and our OSU colleagues with the RPG. We put bids in through the tasking and coordinating process. So the roads policing group support us, particularly out sort of the Thorn, Moorends area where we get cross-border crime and actually we find we can tackle in the same sort of areas rural crime where off-road bikes might be used to steal fuel from farmland. Those same areas affected by criminality across from West Yorkshire or some homicide where vehicles might be targeted for theft. You know, recently actually up on the north side of our border with some joint work with West Yorkshire Police with a stolen car that had travelled from West Yorkshire through into our area and committed offences in Doncaster area. But joint work with our roads policing group from South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire Police, the roads policing group recovered the car, made a number of arrests. So we do work. I think we're getting better in the rural areas, but I know we've got a lot more that we can do.
On page 22, 2.22, this is drugs interventions, and you say what you've been doing, but you list there in a series of bullet points the outcomes. I just wanted to say how helpful that was. We often get lengthy descriptions in these reports about activity, or you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing the other. We don't always get any sense of what the outcome is of all the activity, but that was just very helpful to have that, so thank you for that. On page 26, VAW, violence against women and girls, 5.1, 9% reduction in VAW offences. I don't know whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, I think it is always difficult, isn't it, to tell whether the work that you're doing. And when you work at the Safer Doncaster Partnership Board does an awful lot around VAW. I think there's a much greater understanding from the public through work that the partnership does, through South Yorkshire Police's corporate comms team about raising awareness. Does an increase in reporting mean that you're successful with you're raising awareness, more people are happy to report about it? Does it mean that by raising awareness about it more and being more proactive around actually reducing the amount of incidents? I think it is always challenging to tell. I think the surveys that we've done though, and that's been a partnership piece of work, the sort of VAW surveys I think are probably the most informative piece of work, because they help us to understand why women feel vulnerable and in particularly which locations, and that's actually informed some of the direction the funding has gone. Some of the Safer Streets funding has been informed by that work around additional CCTV and cameras. That SSDP group are also looking at whether there's different apps out there. I know it was brought to the Strategic Safeguarding Board, the most recent one, to see if that's actually something that Doncaster will do a bit more work on, to see if something we can look at force-wide that helps people understand where there are sort of safe havens. The licensees are a big part of some of that work. I mean, the 9% reduction is 1 month compared to 1 month, June versus June 23-22. So small snapshot, to be fair, in the grand scheme of 12 months of data.
Just above that, on para 4.410, with the charts, I just noticed that and thinking back to the previous reports that you've done for us, this is DVPOs and breaches of DVPOs. You seem to have a lot of breaches in the Doncaster. Is this because you're more proactive around this in Doncaster district than elsewhere, or is this just me imagining?
Yeah, Commissioner, I don't think that we just have a borough where we have offenders that are more determined to continue to commit offences against their victims. I think we have an integrated offender management team that we give dedicated time to bring about the enforcement. So we are in a really good rhythm, and have done for quite a long time, to be honest, about ensuring that our integrated offender management team know what conditions are for offenders that have been given a DVPO, that they are regularly conduct checks and ensure that that they comply. And when you're fairly consistent in that way, you end up revealing more breaches. So we take more back to court than most of the other boroughs at the moment, because of the way that our IOM team runs.
Okay, interesting. Page 28, 6.3, this is missing from home. You talked there about the missing from home team, and the results seem very positive. I wonder whether the team, does it work at weekends and in the evenings? Or
Yes.
It does.
Yeah, we still have coverage at the weekends. It's not as many staff on a weekend as you would during other parts of the day, because actually some of the partnership work is key to their work. We're really pleased about the way that they're starting to impact on it. I think the relationships that they're developing with some of the children's homes, the relationships that they're developing with some of the regular missing from homes is actually crucial as well. Particularly those young people who might not trust the agency, it's just trying to help to form trusted relationships to discourage the missing episode in the first place, or when they do go missing, to actually make contact with them directly and arrange to meet, return them, and ensure that they're safe and well. And the big motivation around this is to actually to separate off that work from our response function, because it just depends on how your active demand for missing people can go. But actually, the number of missing people, that can be an awful lot of response resource that ends up conducting those inquiries, and it means that you can end up missing some of your other demands, your priority calls. So by separating it off like that under the district support hub, I think we're starting to see some real improvement, give a bit more capacity to our response teams. And I think some of that's reflected in particularly some of the incremental improvements in our emergency response times across the district, by taking some of those longer term pieces of work away from response, giving them a bit more capacity to actually start to bring about some improvements for our response targets.
Yeah, very good, thank you. And finally on page 29, 6.9, this is modern slavery. You're talking about Airbnbs being used as pop-up brothels. But you also say towards the end there about how you rely on community intelligences. How do the public get in touch with you on matters like that? Is this 101, or is there?
I mean, there are multiple avenues open to the public.
If I go to a community group, what do I tell them? That's what I'm saying. So
yeah, I mean, our neighbourhood teams are still probably at the forefront of that contact with the public and the means of gathering community intelligence, and the relationships that we have with our partners, and to be fair, the non-stat partners is important, because there's community intelligence that goes through those agencies rather than directly to us. So certainly, you look at something like child exploitation, we have regular forums to discuss and manage intelligence around sort of child exploitation, and it's the same for slavery. So the force team supports us well, and we have our Operation Duxford next week, where we'll be working with on the slavery team next week to do some more around this important piece of work.
Thank you very much. Don't know if anybody else has got anything to say or add. If not, thank you very much indeed. Informative as usual. Ian, thank you very much for that. And you need to get away to Doncaster, I think. So.
That's okay, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Charlotte, rather than keeping you waiting, you may be interested in what's going on, but you may like to get away. So if we take you next, then your firearms licensing update, and there is a little report on that. It's item 13. Came late to me. I don't know if that's because anyway, item 13. Very positive report, and thank you for that. But I think the public would just like to know a little bit about why it's positive. And
yeah, no problem. So I think, Commissioner, we originally reported back to you around the firearms licensing back in February, with just an overview in terms of how many people had expired certificates, how many of those that had applied for renewals were waiting for their cases to be decided, and how many of those who had applied for the renewals had been issued with a temporary permit. Just if I can update you around some of those elements initially. So we currently have no certificate holders in South Yorkshire in possession of firearms with an expired certificate, and we have no temporary certificates issued to anyone at this time, which hopefully reassures the public around that focus that we have around public safety. In terms of renewal applications, they have dropped since we had obviously the spike after the COVID pandemic, and we would now consider the demand to be business as usual. So just if I can explain a little bit about the process. So once we receive completed application, there are a number of checks that take place in relation to medical history and things like that. Obviously checking police records, and anything that flags up will be assessed. They do a risk assessment around that person's suitability to hold a licence. If there are any significant concerns around either renewals, granting an initial licence, or if people want a variation on the licence, so that can be if somebody holds a licence and they want to add an additional firearm or a shotgun to it, then likewise they are risk assessed, and they will come to myself as head of the department for a sign-off, and we will consider through a threat and risk approach whether that person is suitable to either have a licence or to maintain the licence that
so
they
all
have.
those would come to you?
Yeah, I assess them all on an ongoing basis,
Right.
so I will do build so many into them so that we do keep on top of it that way. They obviously are assessed by the team in the first place, and the ones that they think are the highest priority that I need to look at to me, in that sort of order. So in terms of grants awaiting input, we've got quite a high number in progress. However, of those, I think it's nearly 300, almost half of those are awaiting further information around medical information, which tends to be quite a lengthy process in terms of getting information from GPs. So when it comes to things like renewals, we do prompt people quite some time in advance, so 4 months in advance, that their renewal's coming up, so that they have the time to get that information.
Do GPs charge people?
They do. They do.
Is that a set amount?
I think it depends on the GP, doesn't it?
Really?
And I think it's not their priority either to provide that information, so it can be quite slow for people to get that information, which is why we build in that 4-month prompt to try and get that for them. Just some of the bits around, I can give you some updates that aren't in the report around the number of licences that we've revoked, and that can be for a number of reasons. That can be because they've come to our attention through a police incident. It can be that we're updated around some changes to their medical information, and a further assessment will take place, and in some instances there are some revocations. So since April we've revoked 5 firearms licences and 27 shotgun ones. That's the figures that are up to date on the system at the moment, but as of Tuesday this week there's another 15 to add to that. So I am confident that there is a robust system around assessing the applications, and that anyone who comes to light they have a tag on their address if they are a firearms or a shotgun licence holder. So if there is an incident reported at their address, it will immediately flag up with my team, who will conduct a risk assessment, and then it will come to me for consideration.
Is this something you did in North Yorkshire as well?
It wasn't my responsibility in North Yorkshire, so it is a new area of work, but it's been very interesting.
I guess you've got even more in North Yorkshire.
I think there's 8,000 licence holders in South Yorkshire and there's about 20,000 in North Yorkshire, so yeah, a little bit different. A lot of farmers.
8,000 is a lot anyway.
It is.
Yeah. Good. Sorry, Steve, did you? Oh. Mike, did you have a question?
No, it was an observation that there's a lot of grass.
A lot of grass.
Irrelevant.
Could I just ask a
Sure.
question, Charlotte? Just in relation to firearms licence and appeals, do you get many?
We do get some. I won't say we get many at all. Obviously, they will go through to court to be reviewed. We have had a 100% success rate with those to date.
Right.
That does give me some confidence that the decisions that we are making
That's
are
what I
the
was
right
asking
ones.
about, really. Yeah, thank you.
It sat with me as a chief officer for quite a few years when I was in ACC, and we had one or two over that entire period.
Well, thank you very much. A good,
You're welcome.
positive report and a robust approach that we have in South Yorkshire, which we're glad to know.
Thank you.
You can stay or go, whichever you want.
I might stay out of interest if that's okay.
Well, of course, not at all.
Thank you.
In that, we need to have gone out of order, but we've gone out of order. We will now go back to 11, which is forced performance against the police and crime plan. And this is one of our 3 priorities. This is treating people fairly. And Tim, is this you?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Again, we'll just ask the odd question. So I'm starting on page 32, if that's all right, at the bottom of there. 3.6, this is positive action. It talks there about each, if I understand it right, each of the 4 districts were putting forward a PC to work for 3 months around positive
We've done that with some of our campaigns. What we've not had is a permanent standing army as a positive action team, which I think some larger forces have. It's a question of trying to obviously balance that off against operational necessity. What we have done in the past, and we will do again in the future, should we think it's necessary, is pull people off for a period of time to do dedicated positive action as opposed to doing it as part of business as usual.
So you do hope to have that in the future?
We've done it in the past. It's an option for us to do it again in the future. I think what we need to do is just see how things progress over the course of the next 12 months.
Yeah, it's how it's sustained, isn't it? Okay. So that was 3.6. If I go to the next page, 3.10, 3.10. It seems as if those from ethnic minority backgrounds are recruited but then leave, not all, but leave before they become student officers. Is that, am I reading all this correct? Is that part of what's happening in South Yorkshire?
I mean, obviously we have an attrition rate, and the challenge that we have with officers who are from minority backgrounds is because the numbers are relatively small. If you read it purely in terms of percentage terms, that can sometimes lead you to a sort of not the wrong conclusion, but obviously people do leave. We do have an attrition rate, and you know, we do see that. Yeah.
Do we know? Have we an idea why?
Yeah, so we do exit interviews, or everyone's offered an exit interview to try and understand why, and there's a variety of reasons. I think again, in terms of officers from minority ethnic backgrounds, the challenge is that the numbers are so small. It's very difficult to identify any long-term trends.
No, I agree. Small numbers does make that difficult to draw big conclusions or broad conclusions. Is it something the IEP? Are you?
That's it.
Well, we've tracked this issue, I think, really since the inception of the IEP in terms of recruitment and retention, and have been regularly updated. But in a sense, the story is this is difficult. Progress is being made, but it is slow and it is not matching the demographic change. And I think the question that we've asked, and I can ask it again, is is there any intelligence about the age at which younger people begin to consider a career with the police? That's one question. I think the last time we asked, the answer was we're not aware of anything, but in terms of getting upstream of decision making in what young people might consider.
But you're a former headmaster, you must know the answer. You must know the answer to that.
If head teachers were omniscient, then the world would have no problems. So sadly, we're as ignorant as everybody else. But I just wonder whether there is any academic research about, particularly in relation to public services, when people begin to consider this is something I might like to do.
I don't think there's any academic research into that. I think there's probably some anecdotal speculation as to when people make those decisions. There are definite trends whereby people who have police officers within their families consider policing, and I suppose similar to other careers as well, if you've got medical staff within your family, you are exposed to that and therefore you consider it from a younger age. I think what we are also now seeing, particularly with the police constable degree apprenticeship, is that people around the age of 17, 18, when we're thinking school leaver, degree, higher education, etc., we are seeing a distinct cohort joining us at 18 now. But in terms of when do they actually start thinking about police, and when you talk to our new student officers, some of them have said, I've always wanted to be a police officer. And for others it was a case of, well, I found out something about this and it looked like something all right to come and have a go at.
I mean, I'd offer this reflection that before I became involved in this, I had very little idea of the complexity and the interest and the extent to which the public service ethos, which one assumes in other public services, actually runs right through the police service. So my hunch is that to really make an impact, the influencing of young people probably needs to take place earlier than it currently is. I mean, that's a hunch, but I know that it wasn't something that would have been on our radar as an attractive or interesting career, except for people who are already on the inside, so to speak. So that's one thought. The other thought,
we call them mini police. So we're making a start.
And we have a cadet programme as well, so we do target young people at about the age of 16. I think the challenge around that, without necessarily an evidence base, is actually your timescales around that, is you're not dealing with today's recruitment problem. So when we know we've got money to recruit people, we're looking to do that now. We're not reading people who, reading's probably the wrong word, but influencing people who want to join the police in 10 years. We're looking to deal with today's issues. It's probably a much
absolutely
broader
understand.
long-term issue.
It leads into the second and final observation, and that is who the real influencers are in terms of the groups that are underrepresented and that have been the focus of our concern for the last 7 or 8 years. And I don't know who the real influencers would be for youngsters who might want to consider a career in policing. But I suspect that there's probably an unmined resource that if one could get at it, might go some way to accelerating the program.
But I mean, we've talked about it many times at the IAP, and you've seen some of the work that we've done in terms of outreach work. It is really difficult. I think the other dynamic in this as well is that because we're recruiting lots and lots and lots of new police officers at the moment, without a doubt we've seen the average age of new joiners drop. We have lots of people who are 18 and 19 joining us as police officers now. I think in times when we've been recruiting less police officers, or a much smaller number, that average age tends to be higher. I recall when I joined the police, I was 24 years old, and I was probably about the average age at training school. Well, that's far from the case when you go into one of our classes at the training school at the moment. And I think that then leads into your attrition rate, because when you've got a bigger intake of younger people who've perhaps not got experience of working other sectors before they join, some of them inevitably get in and think, this is just not for me. Which is probably less so when you've got a more mature demographic within your student officers.
I think that's common across a number of professions. I mean, I came across that in some work I was doing the other week in relation to mental health nurses who joined with the highest of motivation. The question I I was asking a national lead for child adolescent mental health services was, is it easy to recruit? And she said, yes, but retention is a nightmare. And people actually find that the challenges of the work are very genuine, and not everybody is cut out for that sort of work.
That said, our attrition rates and our retention rates are very good comparable to, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but they are good comparable to other forces. And I think that if you look at some of the support we put through the Equality Hub, and we were just discussing again about the student hub, through the Equality Hub, supporting student officers, the quality of our apprenticeship scheme, which is, Ofsted had a look at and we're very, very complimentary of. The amount of protected study time that we provide our apprentices with, all of those things I think contribute to a relatively low attrition. That said, that has to be balanced with operational challenges as well.
And as a footnote, the work that's been done on well-being that we heard from in the previous report. When you put those things together, I think there are aspects of a career, apart from the intrinsic interest, that probably people on the outside have no idea about, that ought to make it a more attractive and supportive career option.
I think one of the work streams around the National Police Race Action Plan is in respect of recruitment and retention. There's just been a new national lead appointed, Alison Hadari, who's from the Metropolitan Police. I think the question about influencing groups, particularly around black and minority ethnic candidates, is a really interesting one, which I can pick up with her. I think certainly a lot of the information which has come back to Chiefs Council from people involved in the race action plan is there is cultural blockage around policing is not for us. And actually the real wicked problem for policing to tackle is changing that position, and that is not a quick term fix. It's something that requires community engagement, positive community relationships, value, inclusion, all the principles that we are embedding within our day-to-day work, but actually the impact of that takes some time to...
And if it was easy,
something about people, young
ago.
people seeing people who look like themselves, and the stuff that Ian was talking about when he sent the Muslim officer out to talk about. I did a lot of work, I'm former chair of governors, but I've done a lot of work in the NHS and a lot of work with refugees and asylum seekers, and they have obviously a different opinion of policing when they come to this country. But I think you rightly hit on the last bit then, it's the cultural thing. We don't want anything to do with the police. If you get to the kids early and sow the seeds early enough with somebody who looks like them, then I think you have a greater chance of getting a deeper look into people joining police as a career.
Okay, well, we'll raise a lot of questions and thrash the issue a little bit. We'll no doubt come back to this again sometime. Okay. I'm on page 36 now, which is hate crime. I'm just a bit puzzled by, this is the 3.27 paragraph. It says the reported level of hate crime remains at broadly similar levels. Then it says it's gone up by 4.5%, and then non-hate crime has gone up by 27%. I just couldn't square that, really. Is it broadly? Is it?
I think probably a 4.5% increase when you look at the numbers across the board, which are still relatively low. I think that's probably what it's referring to. Probably not. Could have been written more clearly.
Right. Okay. Right. Let's move to page 37 then. 3.45. Your voice counts. It's a similar issue, really, in a way. The your voice count results. Again, I'm puzzled here. The your voice count results are not that wonderful. But didn't the HMI congratulate South Yorkshire on its listening to the public and all of that? How do we square all this up?
Well, I think, Commissioner, if you look at what we've done in terms of our investments in neighbourhood policing, which, as you're aware, over the past 7 years, the amount of resources that we have invested in neighbourhood policing has been considerable. The engagement that they undertake within communities at a local level, the use of evidence-based problem solving to tackle the issues that matter most to the communities, and making sure that through our various media channels we feed back to the public on what we're doing to tackle those issues. That was quite rightly recognised by HMIC as outstanding practice and as good as that you've seen across the country. And I think that that wasn't just a very quick look, that was the result of an in-depth inspection over 12 months. I think it was reflective of some of the really dedicated officers that we have working in neighbourhood policing, and is very much reflective of the approach of the force to preventative policing.
Yeah, no, I read that, get all that, understand all that, but that para, if you flip the 29% who responded saying you're doing a good or excellent job, if you flip it round, that's 70% weren't in the eyes of the public doing a good or excellent job. And it's worse than it was 2 years ago, that they don't hang together. Is it because your voice counts, we're not sampling very well, or?
I think the sample size for your voice counts is generally quite constrained.
Yeah.
And I think there's also potentially a range of factors external to people's interactions with South Yorkshire Police, and actually issues that are taking place on the national sort of time, on the national level as well. So I think when you look at some of the things that have happened over the last 2 years at a national level, some examples of some individuals who used to be police officers acting in the most appalling of ways, then clearly that has an impact on confidence and satisfaction in policing generally, without it being specific to a local interaction. And I think there's always a sense of it's difficult to disaggregate how much of this is influenced by somebody's actual contact with an individual, because when we sample people who have had contact with us, who've been a victim of crime, when we do our how satisfied were you with your initial contact, the initial attendance, follow-up, etc., the scores are much higher than that. Follow-up is always the area of most concern, and that's, one of the things that we try really hard to push around, actually tell people what you're doing, even if you are telling them there's been no progress on this case but it is still live. Actually updating people is really important. So I think on a local level, when we break that down into crime types, different sort of victim categories, to get a real detailed understanding to help us improve those measures locally.
It's a tricky old area though, isn't it? Because you can have things going on nationally and you get hammered for it. And if they do this, if somebody does a survey that day or that week, you're going to get the wash from that. And it's hard for people like me, therefore, to judge, where is the public in all this. And the public, of course, may flip around from day to day. But,
one of the parallels that I think perhaps demonstrates it is, unfortunately, this hasn't been the case for some time, but a couple of years ago you were regularly getting feedback from people around the time taken to answer telephone calls that they made to the police. But actually, when you looked at the data that we'd done to sample a cross-selection of people who had actually made contact with the police, the actual satisfaction with the initial call was often in the 90%. So it's like there was a real disconnect between what the general feedback was and what some very specific responses were when questions were asked.
Yeah. Well, we simply note these things, that not a lot we can do sometimes about it. On page 39, this is 3.58. I don't ask you to comment on this, it's just a comment by me really. The paragraph is about stop and search, and you say in it, is it likely that the higher search rate for non-white groups could be influenced by factors such as population density, deprivation and crime rates? I've never heard that said before in quite that way in a report, and I just thought, well, good. I think we do have to think a bit more about.
Well, I think we do, and we've invested in an analyst now to really start to get into understanding disproportionality in a more holistic way. Really trying to think about, if you look at stop search, where do we undertake it? What are the intended factors around those areas, and try to explain it a little bit more intelligently.
Yeah. Okay. And on page 40, 3.69, it talks about special measures advisor and the training package for which has been developed and rolled out for 298 officers. Might help if you just tell us what the special measures.
Yeah, so special measures really pertain to victims and witnesses at court, and what can be done to make that experience of giving evidence or going through the court process easier. So that might be something like giving evidence from behind the screen, giving evidence via video link, those sort of things. And it's really important that our officers understand the legislation that pertains to that, particularly when you come across vulnerable victims, so they can start that process right at the start.
And is the intention to roll this out
will be, yeah,
to
make sure,
everybody? Or
as part of our broader investigation improvement programme, to make sure that officers really understand how to deal with vulnerable victims effectively right from the start.
May I ask?
Yes, of course.
Is the term special measures the national terminology for this?
Yes.
Unfortunately, because it has connotations in the assessment of public service.
Indeed.
It's the exact opposite of what this is about.
Yeah. No.
But no, it is the
it's
national,
well known.
it's
Within the criminal
term,
justice system, it's been around.
That's okay. I mean,
I think it was
the national terminology.
I think it was probably around before
Probably
skills were put
predates
into
the other
special measures.
Or hospitals.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because normally you hear special measure and you'll twitch like anything. But
All police forces.
Okay. I think that's everything I'd say, Tim, unless there's something you want to make. Thank you very much. That was item 11. 12, Force Quarter Performance Project Managing Overview. Debbie, you've been very patient. This is 12. Do you just want to give us a couple of headlines and highlights?
This is the quarter one report, so the first report of the financial year that we're bringing to press. So this is the position at the end of June. So based on the information at the end of June, it's where we expect to outturn by the end of the financial year. So at that point, we're currently projecting a £1.62 million underspend, which is around 1% of the overall budget. Whilst we have a number of unders and overs across all the various headings across all the £317 million worth of the revenue budget, the biggest contributing factor is a projected underspend on utilities. So positive news for us really that our utility costs are not materialising as much as we originally thought. We expected around about 100% increase.
You're certainly not spending any money on heating. This
is perfect.
Not in this room anyway.
We're being frugal. But we're not seeing that increase that we anticipated, so it is good news. We hope it will continue. We know it's volatile and we know it can change, it can fluctuate, but we hope it will continue and we will see some benefits in future years as well. So that really is that biggest contributing factor to that projected underspend. What I would point out though is that this doesn't include the 7% pay award that was announced after this point. That will be in future reports. However, it's just worth noting that the government have funded that and we do expect to benefit from that in the current year. And
we are sure that it's fully funded.
That is the risk. We know it will be funded in the current year and next year, but we don't know beyond that because there's no commitment to that.
Are you? Yeah, and next year. What about the actual allocation force by force? Are we confident about that? For next year, or for this? Do we know actually what the sum is that we're going to get?
Yes, we do know the sum that we're going to get, and calculating the actual cost is challenging because it's such a moving piece. But we do, our estimates suggest that we may benefit by the tune of about £500,000 in the current year. And the reason for that is because we put 3% into the budget.
Yes.
7% is what was agreed. But our understanding is when they've looked at the funding, they've assumed the majority of forces are built in 2%, so we've got that 1% buffer in there. So we will actually benefit in the current year. But the longer term is a risk for us if there's no funding built in.
There are some that put in 2%, I think.
Yeah, and that's what nationally they've based it on, that kind of average of forces they've built in 2%. So I think as Debbie's just quite rightly pointed out, you know, we are confident with the numbers in terms of what we're receiving for the next 2 years. It's beyond that is the real conundrum for us in terms of will we get any money or won't we? And if we don't, that is a significant amount of money. It's a fine that would be added on to obviously the savings that we would need to have.
In terms of fully funding, this year, the government have given an additional, they're funding 5% of that 7% nationally on the assumption that forces have generally put in 2%.
Yes. So if you put in a bit more, you're quid. Well,
Sure.
we did.
Which we did.
It's
we
still
did
our
put in
money
more.
that we've, yes.
Yeah, but it gives us a bit of a cushion.
And of course, there's a general election that will come at some point. So.
And then who knows what happens.
Well, maybe a change of government, then it's golden sunshine and
maybe they will
sunny
give us
uplands.
lots of money and we'll all be happy.
And of course, the Garden of Delights.
It's a big positive, Commissioner, that's what it is.
Debbie, we've interrupted you.
That's fine. I was just going to add that we're in a good place in terms of the savings, we need to meet the savings target, the capital programme. Whilst we are at an individual scheme level seeing a few areas of slippage, overall we are still projecting to spend that capital programme. It's still early in the year and we do continue to bring scrutiny and challenge to that and try and improve as we go forward. But we are projected to spend. And I think that really is the key point. Unless you've got any other questions.
Well, the only thing that I noticed was on page 7, it's only a small thing really, but 3.8.5, an overspend on seized dogs. I mean, given the number of times we've mentioned dogs being aggressive and biting people, I just noticed that that's a bit of an upward trend there.
It is, it definitely is, and that is in the current year. We saw an upward trend in that last year, and we've certainly seen an upward trend post COVID.
We invested in it last year, and the growth has exceeded the investment already.
Which is not a good place to be, and nationally this is the case. It's not just here. So.
No, it's not. You see on the news every day at the moment, you know, quite tragic cases where dogs have attacked people, sometimes fatally.
I don't know what you do about it nationally. I'm sure that. And is it partly the result of COVID and people buying animals, and now they?
So there were, on a slightly different level, there was something on the news today about veterinary practices now being sort of investigated for the way that their prices have gone up by way more than the price of the cost of inflation. And I think the estimate was that 80% of households in the UK since COVID have now got pets, whereas before it was about 50%. Quite a significant uplift.
So if a dog is seized and it's put in a kennel for a while things are determined, there's no way you can bill the dog owner for accommodation.
I've certainly come across charges in the past, but often covering those and challenging.
Not worth it. Set the dogs in. Okay, well that was the only thing I had. I see Sophie's on the line. I don't know whether Sophie, you had any comments at all on that report?
Commissioner, and I didn't particularly have any comments. There's just one that stands out, and it's around, and Faz will probably expect this, it's around PBB and just making sure that we've got those arrangements which knit together workforce planning and finance and PBB. Obviously there are a number of vacancies that are discussed in the report. We need to be confident that those vacancies won't be eroded through the PBB process, albeit they might be moved elsewhere.
So just on that point, I suppose the integration, as Sophie's quite rightly pointed out, we have a number of different pieces of work that really need to work together and be integrated. So, you know, our vacancy factor, our workforce plan, the work that we're doing about savings and efficiency, we have to look at that holistically, because otherwise, as you quite rightly pointed out, you know, you end up with kind of vacancies over there and we're counting it as a saving over here. So we've spent a lot of time and effort making sure that that absolutely is not the case. And to strengthen that, that's why we now have the staff deployment board. So we scrutinise every single post every single vacancy, which obviously is quite challenging for people to come in and almost justify why we should do something with them at an individual post level. But it's that level of additional scrutiny, I think, gives us the confidence that we are continuing to align what are quite disparate pieces of work. So I'm confident, and I'm sure Debbie is confident, that we've put all of those additional controls in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sophie, for that. Okay, I think that's everything, Debbie. But it is early in the year. So item 14 is HMICFRS report in the name of the Chief Constable. Is that you, Lauren, or is it Tim? I don't know if there's anything you want to say.
No. I just want to put the report together just to give you assurance. Obviously, we have a number of reports from HMIC. Obviously, you've got some recommendations coming out of the appeal inspection. We've then got recommendations that come out of national reports. Each of those is categorised, allocated with an action owner to make sure that we've got governance around it. I chair a monthly HMIC meeting where I have key people from the force around to make sure that action is driven. There are protocols in place with HMIC whereby we can, once we've satisfied ourselves that we have achieved that AFI, or all is well within South Yorkshire Police, we can submit that and make sure that it's written off and tracked. But aside from that, what we've done through that meeting is we have looked through every peel inspection that's taken place of every force in the country, looking for areas of innovative practice. And we've categorised all those as well, and then gone through and looked at what we might want to have a look at elsewhere to bring to South Yorkshire. And that really reflects our determination to build on the success of the last peel inspection. And if I can put it in these terms, you will obviously recall we were graded outstanding in 3 areas, good in 5 and adequate in 1. And you will have heard me say before, I think if you were to summarise what good looks like, it means you're doing the basics consistently well all of the time. Where you're outstanding, you can actually show innovative and cutting edge policing practice. And our objective where we're good is to move that forward by looking at innovative practice from elsewhere and trying to bring as much as we can to South Yorkshire in the future. And when you overlay that with some of the work that Rick's leading around tech-enabled change, some of the work that we're doing through PBB, which is really shining a light on some of our processes and the money behind it, if you bring all that together, I think we're in a really strong position moving forward.
Good. Thank you for the note. Right, assurance reports. Oh, I should say that we met the HMI, of course, so our new HMI today. So I don't know what good practice they had in Cumbria, but we'll make sure we've got it here in South Yorkshire. So assurance reports, JIAC, Steve, this is 45 to 50. Anything you want to add?
I just want to pick a few things out.
Yes.
Internal audit opinion is positive. We still see ISO governance as an issue, and I know we've got some more stuff into the next meeting later on this month. And we now have a new internal auditor, which I'm sure most of you have met by now. I met with them privately the other day, and they seem to be embedding themselves quite well, and reassuringly to me they find the force as open and transparent as I do, so I'm really pleased with that. And then finally, external audit also feel that they need to examine the IT strategy closer.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Okay. So, Chief Executive reporting 16, PCC's Annual Report. Michelle, I think we need
just to say it's a statutory requirement for you to publish an annual report. Kevin has coordinated the inputs and done a lot of work on this, so just to minute our thanks to Kevin for pulling this together, assisted by people in the office, including Sharon here, and SYP colleagues, thank you for contributions. We went to the panel, Police and Crime panel, and we've incorporated their comments as well, so it's just for you to receive it and then it could be published, Commissioner.
Yes, it was quite pleasing at the panel that there were comments. I mean, they'd actually read it and they did offer comments, which doesn't always happen, but it did this time. So, Kevin, I don't know if there's anything you want to add or say.
No, just to thank everybody who helped put it together. It's really useful, and SIP colleagues too, because it's quite a big effort to do that. So thank you. And it's up for design at the minute, so there'll be a glossy version out in the next few weeks, I think.
Thank you very much. We look forward to the glossy version. That's item 16 then. 17 PCC decisions.
Just two to highlight there, Commissioner. Discussions with the force have resulted in a decision from you that your allocation from the proceeds of Crime Act funding that comes in is capped at a certain level, 175,000, although this reads like £175, which would please you even more probably. 175,000, Commissioner. And also Violence Reduction Fund, there's been just in excess of 323,000 given to organisations in South Yorkshire to support young people. Those are the only ones I wanted to highlight.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. The work programme, Michelle?
Nothing to add there, we just have a forward look so that the force and others are aware of the items on the agenda for the next 3.
Okay, thank you. That brings us then to any other business. Is there any other business of which the Chair was notified beforehand, since he hasn't been notified beforehand? There can't be any other business. I think that's everything, so thank you very much indeed, everyone. So, Charlotte, that is a public accountability board. Now you know what it is.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.